Hi folks, Research Warrior back again. For viewers who have not seen my past two videos, I put pen to paper first and then I'll read from it. All my videos are about the religious dogmas, ancient teachings, and most importantly, the search for truth. My other two passions are the topics of UFOs and aliens, of which I do extensive research, and I actually write for a couple of magazines now called Hard Evidence and Ufologist, and a couple of other magazines that I may be making my way into. And also the histories of the wars the world has gone through and the truth about the real, quote, events that occurred during these wars. I've studied the Kabbalistic tree of life for some 12 years now. I'm also a past, now non-financial Freemason, 30th degree. Adam and Eve gained access to the fruit of knowledge by eating from the other tree, which was the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And thus they received the second most precious gift next to life itself, which was awareness. The Old Testament, especially the Pentateuch, contains the only traditional account of the creation of the world of Adam, or supposedly. However, locked within it is also the secrets of the Egyptian initiators of Moses, who was an Egyptian prince, first and foremost. The word Elohim is found 2,602 times in the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, or the Old Testament. It is not used in the Greek New Testament. The Bible does affirm that many beings existed in the same Elohim class as the one supreme Elohim. That is, they are supernatural, semi-divine beings other than God. The term deity, deities, does not inherently tell us if these gods are good or evil, but I will definitely say that they are both, because you need the two energies to compare one to the other. The androgynous constitution of the Elohim, God, is disclosed when he created man in his own image, male and female, or more properly, because the division of the sexes had not as yet taken place. So they were male-female. That just puts actually a big dent in the concept that God is a masculine potency, as portrayed by Michelangelo in the Sistine Chapel. Neither the masculine nor the feminine principle as yet existed in a separate state. There actually is a system of abbreviation by either using shortening the words or by writing under the one letters of each word. For example, the name of Adam are the first letters of the four worlds, Greek worlds. They're called Anatoly, Desis, Actos, and Mesembria, the four corners of the world. One of the profound mysteries of Kabbalism is that set once again upon the name of Adam, the three letters ADM also form the initials of the name Adam, David, and the Messiah. These three personalities were said to have contained one soul, hence the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Question mark. There are schools of thought that have taught that the human soul was actually divided into two parts, male and female, which means that man remains in an unperfected creation until these parts, and you can also call them sparks as such, reunite through the emotion of which man calls love. Now also, the modern concept of marriage is to a certain degree founded upon these ideals. So the word soul mates also has a more understandable meaning as well, as in, you know, you're looking for your soulmate, you find your soulmate, well, there you are, there's that spark. The Supreme Creator, and not the creators of man, had a definitive purpose, purpose in our creation, To doubt the judgment of the Supreme Creator is plain stupid. In other words, a definite no-no. For example, in the church, celibacy is reserved for those who have reached a degree of spiritual unfoldment. But when it was advocated for the masses of unenlightened humanity, it then became a dangerous heresy, which was and is fatal, alike to both religion and philosophies. Through ignorance man falls, and through wisdom he redeems himself. The story of Adam and Eve is central to the belief that God created human beings to live in paradise on earth. When Eve, according to the book of Genesis in the Old Testament, gave Adam some of the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, of course he took it. Why not? Just like a child would, because Adam nor Eve knew what death was. God did not tell Adam or Eve anything whatsoever about death. Adam and Eve, prior to being ousted from the Garden of Eden, could have eaten from the tree of life and would become immortal, but they didn't, because they, like babies, children, knew not anything, especially what death was. So what happens? Well, God pretty much directs their attention to the tree of knowledge. In other words, he goes, so through God, so in thought actually, God was the tempter to begin with. You might as well tell little children, do not eat these lollies on the table. I'll be back in a minute. Need I say any more? So wisdom was gained through disobedience at a severe cost. The expulsions from the garden began when a dialogue occurred with a woman and a serpent, which was identified in Genesis 3:1 in the Old Testament as an animal that was more crafty than any other animal made by God. Although it must be noted, Genesis did and does not identify the serpent with Satan, does not identify it with Satan. The fall of Adam and Eve was depicted in the Sistine Chapel by Michelangelo, as I mentioned. Look it up and you will see Adam and Eve with belly buttons as well in different paintings. Wow, what did Michelangelo know? If Eve came from Adam's rib, she would not have had a belly button. But she did, and so did Adam for that matter. What that tells you is look elsewhere for the real Adam and Eve story. Look elsewhere. Now before I go elsewhere, I'll just bring to your attention the expulsion was not, from my perspective, as a retribution for eating the fruit, but to prevent a direct challenge to God. Behold, the man is becoming as one of us. So more than one God was speaking. God's decided to remove this threat by exiling Adam and Eve from the garden, and to make sure they did not try to re-enter the garden, they installed cherubs, or cherubs, who were human-headed winged lions, and the ever-turning sword to guard the entrance. In Genesis 3:24, the Old Testament, there is the Abrahamic, ancient Judaic creation account of the creation of Adam, which says, male and female, God created them, before creating the separate beings of Adam and Eve. However, there is another story, which happens to be the true story from my perspective. The Sumerians belonged to one of the earliest civilizations on earth, 3000 to 1750 BC. People have known about the Babylonians since the ancient Egyptians, Hebrews and Greeks had contact with them. What no one knew was that the Sumerians had preceded the Babylonians and had developed the writings, also religious and agricultural systems, which the Babylonians adapted and modified later on. There is only one account of the Sumerian creation story which has survived, but it is a suggestive one. This story also had the Hulupu tree. This means that the tree of life had a counterpart, or more correctly, was the tree of life story, adopted by the Hebrews and then the Christians and the Muslims. The tree has always been associated with divinity and immortality. One of the most powerful Babylonian myths is the concept of the axis mundi, or else known as the world axis. It's navel. As such, so yes, Earth too has a quote, navel, which means Earth itself is alive and always has been. We now come to the true story of the tree of life. It has been linked with the serpent or dragon, the winged serpent, for over 1,000 years before, that's right, before Genesis was even written. There's a green liberation vase in the Louvre, the French museum in Paris, which was excavated from the ancient Mesopotamian city of Lagash. Then inscribed on it from the king of Gudea of Lagash, Circa, 2025 BC, was dedicated to Ningizida. On this vase is an image of two entwined snakes on a rod. Some scholars have dated the vase as far back as 4000 BC. This is more than likely the world tree, also known as a Yggdrasil, the tree of life. So the Bibles were basically plagiarized as such. Ningizida is a fertility god. He was also the lord of the tree. Now we're starting to work out exactly who it was. Often depicted as a serpent with a human head. In 2025 BC, the cup of the Sumerian king Gudea of Lagash actually showed two winged dragons holding back a pair of opening doors, which revealed a caduceus of uniting snakes, which was the incarnation of the god Ningizida, who happens to be one of the names given to the consort of the mother goddess, to whom the cup is inscribed. Lord of the Truth. In the northern Babylonian, the goddess of the tree of life was called the Divine Lady of Eden, or correctly called Edin. Not Eden, but Edin. There is one verse among many of the creation stories. Let's begin with the Lucifer rebellion in this story. The tree of life was transported to a high mountain region that was to become what is now Afghanistan. This is a story of the, quote, original fallen ones. As such, these humans were the Homo erectus before they were to be tampered with by having their DNA mixed with that of the Anakim, Anunnaki, to become the Homo sapien man. If you look up the book of Genesis 6:4 in the Old Testament, you will read the part where the Nephilim, whom the gods destroyed on earth by a flood, or were they destroyed? The ones that mated with the daughters of humans. In it, the story, it said that there was no genetic difference between the Watchers, the children of Seth, and the daughters of men. However, this is another story of men that dates back before the seeding of the Anunnaki and that of the Homo erectus man. Hence the end result, you and me, the Homo sapien man. This mingling was called Anakim, or the real name, leading on to Anunnaki. There were actually two entirely different stories in the book of Genesis. For example, in Genesis 6:2, it says that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, so they took them for wives of all which they chose. Whilst a bit later on, just down below, 6:4 correction, there were giants in the Hebrew Bible, Nephilim, in those days and afterwards, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men. This differentiation points directly to the seeding of that of human aliens DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. So this story is a pure Mesopotamian story, which was to eventuate into the Indus Valley civilization, which flowed south into India, east into China, and west into future Europe. But at this point, I will look upon this story as being just that, a story. Eve bore, according to the story of Mesopotamian, 63 children. 30 were daughters and 31 were sons. This was before the quote default, before the fall. Keep that in mind. When Adam and Eve were ousted out of the Garden of Eden, there were families that consisted of 4 generations, which numbered 1,647 pure line descendants. In other words, directly from Adam and Eve. The marriage ceremonies of the first and second generations of the garden were always performed by Adam and Eve. In Genesis 4:14 it indicates that there were other members of Adam's family already living as adults at the time when Cain killed Abel. It is clear from what is described in Genesis that God intended for Adam's siblings to marry and reproduce. And it stands to reason, the fact that, going by this Mesopotamian creation story, that Adam and Eve were themselves blood related. Adam and Eve were in every sense, before they fell from grace, perfect. By this I mean their body contained no defects. So by this state there was no stigma nor any health concerns over sibling marriages. However, at the point of the fall, God altered the states of his creation, which meant the death of all living things happened through a process of gradual decay. And with that became diseases and so on and so on. And the people of Sumer were, stated earlier, a part of the Mesopotamian civilization. With inner Sumerian cities' walls, for example, were avenues that were used for religious processionals, which were high step temples known as ziggurats, of which each were dedicated to a different god or gods. The ziggurats were built by the Sumerians, Babylonians, Elamites, Akkadians, and also Assyrians for local religions. These were raised platforms that dated from the Ubaid period. The ziggurat was a primordial structure with a flat top. What is of great importance to take in as such is the Nephilim, the gods of the heavens, taught man to look up into the heavens, just as Yahweh taught Abraham to do. No one but the Nephilim who travelled to Earth could have seen Earth as the 7th planet. The well-known decoder of the Sumerian clay tablets, which also are housed in many world museums, explained the central religion events of ancient Mesopotamia. Zechariah Sitchin, a well-known decoder of the Sumerian clay tablets. What must be recommended, or correction, what must be remembered, is the fact that the Sumerian creation story was documented. There were 7 stations of Marduk, the house of holiness. The second station was the field where the field separates. The next, Lord of the poured out of fire. I don't know what it meant by that. With a full name partly rubbed out of what this was. The 4th station as being the holy place of destinies, and the 5th station known as the roadway. The 6th station, the traveller's ship, and the 7th was the house of building life on earth. These 7 stations actually represented the flight plan of the Nephilim. Were the same approach apparently used by NASA when they headed for the moon missions. The Americans did not land on the moon, and as far as I know, no one has. The epic of creation informs us that, going by Sumerian recorded accounts, the gods came to earth following the decision of their leader, Marduk, where he waited until Earth's soil dried and hardened enough for Marduk and his astronauts to land. This tells me that the Anunnaki Anakim were already hovering above Earth directly after it had been created. This simply means that aliens are also a product of the God of all gods. The God of all gods. They too have a very important role, and always have had one, in the story of humankind. So Earth was not just the object of a quick visit. It was planned and deliberate. In other words, they created a home away from home. The book of Genesis describes that Earth was a place that drew its waters from a network of 4 rivers. The biblical name Eden is of Mesopotamian origin, which stems from the Akkadian Edino, which, as stated earlier in the video, means plain, as in plains, steppes. The actual name Edin may have meant home of the righteous ones. There was a Sumerian text which relates the first 7 cities only in part. The first of the cities was Eridu, which was given to Nidinamud, the leader. The second, Bad Tibira, was given to Nugig. The third, Larak, he gave to Pabilgsag. The fourth, Sipa, to the hero Utu. And the fifth, Shurapak, was given to Sud. Ever since the time of numerous excavations and assiduous decipherings, when the critical, unbiased, also scientific light was applied to the Old Testament, there was and is indispensable proof that there are too many striking analogies between what was exposed in the Old Testament and those found in surrounding cultures of the Near East. For example, the views of the Old Testament are almost identical to those of the Babylonian mythology. Everyone knows about the New World Order today, unless you are really way out in the mould or somewhere. And their aim is to now take in what is happening in the Middle East, to take over the world, to usher in the demonic religion. How will they do that? Well, by unifying possibly the 2 sister religions, Christianity and Islam, right under the noses of the unwary Christian and Muslims alike. In other words, fundamentalists from both sides, being joined together, will be out to destroy Israel. I don't believe it'll work, because in the first place there was no reason to organise and institutionalise religions to begin with. That's when our woes started. That's when our problems with everything to do with life itself was based on religions being institutionalised and organised. It is a proven fact that all religions have the one common source. And that source is galactically, genetically connected to the gods who from heaven came. So if you should wonder who the biblical God is, no need to wonder any longer. He is an Anunnaki God. And no, not the God of gods, an Anunnaki God, who was and is also the God of the Anunnaki. The planet-sized ship Nibiru, which means planet which crosses the skies, or planet of the crossing, is about 2.5 to 3 times the size of planet Earth. It is here already. The only reason we humans we humans cannot see it is because it does not want to show itself. But it will, from my perspective, in the not too distant future. The sooner, the better. When they do show themselves, then we humans will have a decision to make. Follow the religious stories that they taught to men, or discard all religions once and for all. The purpose of Nibiru coming back is as a galactic peacekeeper. Secondly, to create new hybrid races, and also emotionally clearing as such of our own good and bad thoughts connected to the mixing of our DNA with the aliens to begin with. That also will be reduced. We already have specially gifted starseed children on Earth. Only the ones among us humans who is awake will see these special children with many individual gifts to pass on to man. If they don't like you, then take a long, hard look at the self. They are here, and they are here now. So if a child is very inquisitive and always wanting to question everything, talk to them. Until the next video story, stay safe and ride out the storms that are here. They will dissipate eventually. See you later, folks.